A landlord with 4 properties is forced to sell. Let's have a look. Good evening everyone, Florian here and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. I thought we'd have a look at this article from Yahoo that I saw a couple of days ago now. And well, it's about a landlord that's forced to sell some properties, which isn't surprising considering everything's got more expensive, but the way that this is framed, I thought is interesting. Okay, so let's look at this. So it's unfair boomer tax. So they're framing it with the intergenerational conflict. Landlord reveals a nightmare that's forcing him to sell 4 properties, and people are going to be going, oh, well, you got 4 properties. There's a lot of jealousy out there, a lot of tall poppy syndrome, and that's driving a lot of people's frustration with the property market. They see previous generations that got houses a lot cheaper, and they're feeling like, oh, well, it's unattainable. I can't do it. They don't seem to appreciate the fact that, you know, a shitbox someone bought 40 years ago, the amenity, the size, the location, all of these things change. And they're expecting to buy in what was a fringe suburb when the population was half in the country to what is now virtually or close to inner city with all these amenities. They're expecting it to be the same. Well, things change, guys. So let's look at this one. A landlord has revealed the hellish reality of owning multiple properties in Australia during a cost of living crisis. Well, yeah, he doesn't really own them, does he? We'll look at this. And seems to be a similar... In some ways, I feel sorry for this guy because it's a similar story about people going all in property. And that's surely you can make a capital gains, and I bet you this example has. But you're putting all in property, guys. This is an example of someone doing it with their super. Remember that teacher who had 5 properties that he owned or was paying the mortgages on through his super fund, and he was kind of screwed with the COVID? But apparently that's the only way you can get ahead here in Australia. An expert warns many property owners are doing it tougher than you might think. Craig Doyle has 4 investment properties with his wife, and they were hoping they would cover them in retirement. However, it has become an absolute nightmare for the 61-year-old kitchen supplies salesman. Now, I mean, think about it. You've got 4 properties. You've got to pay the interest. You've got to maintain the properties. You've got to deal with the real estate. You've got to deal with tenants. You've got to deal with tenants not rocking up. You've got maintenance, the building depreciating and falling apart just because of nature and the environment. You've got all the potential nightmare tenant scenario. Or you could stick that money in an REIT or exchange-traded fund or boring-ass shares that are just going to pay your money. And what do? You've got to pay maybe a tidy management fee if it's an exchange-traded fund. What would you rather? Honestly, what would you rather? I guess it's people's risk profile. You know, one viewer was asking my opinion on Bitcoin in the comments because it's gone up, and I hope those of you that have invested in that product or in crypto and Bitcoin, I hope you've done well. But it's something that's a little too volatile for my stress levels, at least at the moment. Doyle and his wife used their superannuation 10 years ago. So they bought 10 years ago. They should be with significant profit to purchase the 4 properties, but they're now having to sell them because they've been a huge drain on their wallets. Well, yeah, properties cost money to maintain. There's all these costs associated with it. And with interest rates going up, it's going to cost more to service those mortgages. Okay, let's... Okay, so it's a stock image. Maybe I should find that one and put it on the... Oh, Getty, you got to pay for it? No. Anyway, people say you own 5 houses, but I don't. I own 5 debts, he told the Australian Financial Review. They are killing me. They are reversing my ability to retire. I mean, surely in 10 years, if he's bought 10 years ago, he would have significant capital growth on those properties. Would have to have huge capital growth. I'm selling purely to get my money back and put it back in super. But it should be in super. If he bought them in his, probably in the market. It's too expensive to own investment properties here. Now, I'll zoom up. I'll scroll up. While I get a drink of water, because I finished my coffee before I decided to record. Let me know in the comments where you think our good gentleman here in the article, where he lives. Where does Doyle live? Where do you reckon? Let's see if you guessed the state right. Doyle has hit back at Aussies who think landlords are just money-hungry baby boomers trying to squeeze as much cash out as possible out of tenants. We're the ones being demonized. It's unfair that the government is taxing my generation, he said. Well, I mean, every generation is getting taxed to the hilt. It's unfair the voting patterns of previous generations are driving the cost up of everything. But then again, you've got a whole bunch of young people that are voting for these renewable energy initiatives. It's going to just destroy our cost of living in the next few decades. It's not going to get cheaper. Think. Here's maybe I should add this as a pillar to the property or housing market here in Australia. Another one we should add to the 10 we already have. Voting intentions of younger generations driving up the cost of everything in the country. If you move to uncontrollable or variable renewable energy, that's going to drive the cost of everything that's manufactured, everything that's transported, everything that's stored in this country. It's going to impact housing. Doyle's property headache has been caused by the Victorian government's COVID debt repayment plan, which has seen homeowners hit with an average of $1,300 extra in land tax after the tax-free threshold was cut from $300,000 to just $50,000. And, $300,000, there's going to be property that's worth more than that, or the land is going to be worth more than that for a lot of people. And we've covered this on the channel when it came in. It's all well and good to hand out money to everyone, but you've got to pay it back. And there you go, land tax. Nearly 400,000 property owners have been stung by this new plan, which is estimated to raise about $4.7 billion. Doyle reckons these fees, as well as others associated with owning a home, have cost him upward of $100,000. And you can't really blame the government for going after landlords. Housing's unaffordable, they'll just blame landlords. Sure, they're doing it to pay for all of these debts they've incurred. Oh boy. Many landlords are mum and dad investors. Landlords and tenants are often pitted against each other, but both face financial impacts from changing economic conditions. Improving the rights of Australian renters, who make up about a third of the population, has been at the core of the discussion, with many expressing they feel trapped with no power as property prices are pushed out of reach and rents hit record highs, while the number of available homes hit record lows. Now, this is the problem, where you'll have people voting for interventions into the market, like the Greens pushing for rent control, or here, and now I've got to do a video on it, guys. Sorry the content hasn't been coming out, but it's just been quite flat out at the moment. And I've been doing like 9-hour stints of scanning, and it's exhausting. So I get home, I'm just too tired, and I think, okay, I'll record in the morning, but I just don't get to it. I need to get back into the swing of it. I'll get there, but there's one I want to talk about is the Greens here in Queensland, because on Brisbane we've got the election, and they want to use city funds to purchase a race course, of course, in the posh suburbs, because the Greens hate horse racing, and turn it into social housing and other things. Literally, they want to compulsorily acquire private property. Isn't it awesome, guys? The problem is, if you demonize landlords, if you demonize people investing in property, there's going to be less stock built. We need to keep building housing because we're barely keeping up with the population growth as it is. And sure, you can argue for a slowing down of population growth. But I think, the Greens, they would rather take private property away from people than argue for a decrease in the rate of population growth. So these are ideological positions now. I can't see it getting much leverage, that argument. So landlords have been battered by the most aggressive interest rate hiking cycle in a generation. Yeah, but I mean, he's got 4 properties over 10 years. He would have shitloads of capital growth. He'll be fine. It's probably just too much of a pain in the ass to manage it. All these costs, all these issues. Domain's Chief of Research and Economics, Dr. Nicola Powell, has told Yahoo Finance the idea that the majority of landlords are sitting on huge property portfolios and raking in cash wasn't quite right. Australia's rental market is quite unique. In fact, that the largest portion of rentals are provided really by mum and dad investors, she said. Isn't this what we want? We want, rather than large corporates or large conglomerates or the state, we want individuals providing a service to other individuals. That, I would argue, is the best outcome. But we're going to see a push, build to rent. It'll be big. You'll be fighting with your own super funds, controlled by the banks and the unions, to buy property. You don't want that. You want to fight. It's hard enough fighting against mum and dad investors. Can you imagine how difficult it would be fighting against the big corporates? They may have 1 or 2 rental properties and are sensitive to the changes in interest rates, are actually quite evident. You can understand why we saw the trend of people having to offload an investment property, and we know that type of investor is much quicker to offload an investment property than an owner-occupier, because obviously it's your primary place of residence. The vast majority, 71% of the 2.2 million landlords in the country, own just one investment property, according to data from the ATO. A further 19% own 2 properties. Koshi here. We've got to hear from Koshi, always. Koshi begs Aussies to ditch the greedy landlord image. This is the tall property syndrome. It's the jealousy. The jealousy that's coming through here. You're not going to be able to ditch it. There's a whole bunch of people that just have this fantasy view in their head. Koshi believes landlords are being unfairly targeted as the scapegoat by angry Australians and has called on the public to put down their pitchforks. You probably have one in your family or among your friends. I bet they've increased the rent to cover rising loan repayments. You compare the market, economic director said in an opinion piece for the Nightly. But vilifying property investors is going to make the crisis a whole lot worse. The reality is many of those landlords are now saying it's simply not worth it and are selling up, which just adds to the problem. And before you say, then people can buy the houses. It's not going to happen, guys. You want investors buying property and renting them so that those exist. We need rental properties because at different times in your lives, you'll be renting, you're moving, you need it. Oh boy. Can you imagine how if the state controlled all the property and you had to get social housing if you wanted to move from one city to another, from one district to another if you were given permission with your work permit. Koshi said the 3 levels of government have been derelict in not foreseeing the planning to avoid this rental crisis. And he said there was no silver bullet solution to curtail rising rental payments. They aren't property moguls. They're ordinary Australians trying to build a nest egg. So calls for cap on rental prices. And here we go. We've got the greens. I got to have another drink here. It's funny. I spoke to 2 gentlemen the other day who are in Max's electorate. And he was telling me that the Greens were very smart with their door knocking. They had, young people, quite keen and interested. And then the Labor had old, boring, old ladies coming, rocking up. Who do you think would get a lot of the votes? They got their persuasion game. Their policies are dangerous, though. Is asking the government to introduce measures to cap rental prices and build more public housing. Now, capping rental prices, we know what happens whenever you intervene in the market, guys. Okay, let's sketch a little supply-demand curve. Okay, down here on this one, we've got one axis here. This is demand, and this is supply. This is the price, quantity of houses. Now, what happens is, if, say, demand goes up, what happened over here, I'll change the color here. Demand goes up to blue. So that means the equilibrium is now up here at X dollars, and so the supply of property moves up to, Y, from this point to there. Okay? So we're building more houses. But let's say the Greens come in. We'll delete all that. The Greens come in with their idea, their policy. They want to put a cap in place. So let's say this is the market now. Okay, these are our two curves, roughly. Our quantity here, and our demand curve, and our supply curve of property, and we've got an equilibrium price here, and equilibrium price or quantity provided here, Q1. Now the Greens come in and go, okay, we're going to cap property rent increases at this amount here. It's above the current equilibrium, it'll be fine. But say we suddenly get a significant influx in property like we have here. Demand has shifted over. There's more demand for property. Guys, people want more property. So what should happen is the equilibrium, we'll change that to, orange. The equilibrium goes here, here. Okay, so we get more people building houses because the price is higher that they're earning, so it's worth it. Maybe new property projects stack up. Great, fantastic. Maybe a site that needed a little bit too much work now is suddenly financially viable. But because we've got the Greens policy here of this price cap, that means the increase is limited, restricted to this level here. Okay? So all of this here, this amount here, over here, that number of housing from there to there, that's the shortfall that we're going to have. Because they're intervening in the market, they're reducing the incentives for the market to provide those houses. This is just the simple supply-demand diagram, let alone all of the other factors that are coming in. Remember, every year, property is getting more expensive, the construction of property. Because, well, we've got inflation, but also we've got legislation changes driving it up. And a lot of them driven by ideological policies supported by the Greens. So here's the thing. You've got to understand the way you vote will influence and guide where the nation's going. So if you suddenly have continued demand for more environmentally efficient homes, more energy efficient homes, and you think, yeah, no, in the long term, that's better for the environment. Yeah, okay, good, let's do it. Fantastic. It's going to have a cost implication. Now you have to have a report done for every single house you build, where there's going to be air conditioning. Well, $1,000, $2,000, every house. That adds up to the build. It's only a little 1% of a very cheap cost, a spec home, but it adds up every time. And then it just goes more and more, and these things compound. So, sure, you get what you want, but you have to understand the consequences. And I think the majority of people don't understand the actual consequences of what they're calling for. The Greens, with these price caps, we've seen it all around the world. It doesn't work, and it causes more issues. It creates disincentives for investment in the market where you want people to build. During a speech at the National Press Club, he said 30% of the population rented, and not enough was being done to make sure they could survive until the next paycheck. Is that the government's job? There's a question for you. If you want to make sure they can survive in the next paycheck, perhaps reduce the amount of money that you're taking out of that paycheck. How about we allow rent to be tax deducted? What do you reckon? Is that a good idea? The cost of your rent is tax deducted, tax-free. Let me know what you think about that idea, rather than caps. This is such a serious crisis, and all we're doing is tinkering on the edges. What more powerful property developers keep the tax handout, don't cap rents, don't build any more public housing, or certainly not as much as the Greens are proposing. It's never going to be enough for the Greens. I think over the next few years, the entire political class is going to find out what happens when you ignore the 1/3 of the country getting screwed over by a housing system that funnels billions of dollars into the people that don't need it right now, the banks and property investors. He doesn't understand who property investors are. but it's concerning. I mean, people hopefully will grow out of this approach. I mean, some of the Greens I know in the city, quite wealthy, not working class. He accused property investors who are expected to get $39 billion in tax. Is it tax handouts or tax cuts? Of using the capital gains tax discount to bid up the price of housing. He also used the address to announce a Greens plan that would see homes built and rented out below market prices to help struggling Australians. Oh, that's dangerous. I mean, what's that going to do? Let's do a little diagram here of the Greens policy here. Okay, below market. Here we are, a supply-demand curve, and here's our equilibrium price. The Greens come around, and they're going to, at negative dollars, say below market. Below market. Rather than dollars, it's going to be negative dollars. But anyway, that means they're going to create significantly increased demand for these properties. Who's going to get them? Which group? Maybe they'll check your social media posts that have been appropriate. Have you voted correctly? I mean, it just means there'll be more demand and a shortfall. And it may disincentivize people from investing. So let's have a chat about all of this, guys. Certainly interesting framing of the article, attacking boomers and the intergenerational jealousy of what previous generations have had and younger ones are struggling. But when we look at, from a historical perspective, the bitching and moaning about housing affordability is not a new invention. What is a new invention is the significant population growth we've had. I mean, what do we look at? I think since 2016, 1 million new households. That's going to put strain on our infrastructure. Maybe there needs to be a serious discussion about tying our immigration numbers to the actual rate of construction. Maybe it's the immigration numbers that are allowed every year is lagging towards the housing that was built in the previous year. That's a radical solution. Do you think they'd go for it? Maybe states can get more people by building more, facilitating more development, getting out of the way of projects. We have to think of something. Let me know your thoughts on that one, guys, and have a great day. I'll see you all next time. Bye for now.